Prison is scarier than any ghost story. If you've never heard prison stories from the inside, prepare yourself to be inundated with violence and gore. These former inmates share their scary stories from prison, the true stories from the joint that still keep them up at night. Before we get started, make sure you subscribe to Unearthed Hub and click that notification bell so you don't miss a video. Many ex-inmates are still haunted by their experiences, and will do anything to avoid going back. Nurses, loved ones of inmates, and even prison guards share their stories of what it's like to be on the inside. It's an incredibly stressful and scary environment, always looking over your shoulder, never knowing when someone could attack you. Warning, these prisoners share their stories from behind bars, and the results can be quite graphic and disturbing. Watched instructional video on how to not be raped. When I first got there, I had to watch an instructional video on how not to be raped. That was legitimately the scariest memory I had of it. This inmate stopped brushing his teeth so he wouldn't be targeted. Being raped by a kid 10 years younger than you is humiliating in itself, but being forced to French kiss the kid is even worse. You learn very quickly that if you are a targeted inmate that you stop taking care of your oral hygiene. Nobody wants to kiss you if you have green teeth. Her guts were outside of her body, less bloody in a way, but there was a woman there who was definitely developmentally delayed. She had tried to kill her mother, and while the mother was escaping she ran her over, put it in reverse, floored it back over her again, and finally, put it in drive over her one last time. The mother was actually extremely abusive and was in the same prison in a different part. The daughter would always have her arms inside her shirt, you'd only see her arms when she was sitting like eating or something. She's across from me one day eating and I see her drop a pile of something. I immediately was like, WTF, you can't have stuff in the chow hall, what is this girl doing? It was kinda loud when she dropped it, so it wasn't laundry. It looked kinda like meat. How and why does she have meat? We're eating spaghetti right now, oh my god, that's her intestines and guts. Just falling out of her torso onto the floor. She's struggling to gather all of it, it looks slippery. After that I noticed her dropping her guts onto the floor on a regular basis and had to stop being around her at all. It smelled to me, and the other girls would have her pull it out sometimes. So gross. Inmates had a special wedding dress for rapists. The first time I went to visit a prisoner's law student, one of the prisoners knew a law class was coming, *T on his hand and smeared everywhere outside of the cells. This was also my first encounter with prison torture. The guards showed us the wedding dress the inmates used for dressing and raping rapists and other criminals, according to the prison ethics. I have dealt with other instances of horrible torture, but this one stuck with me because it was just laying there with blood, like when you see pictures of medieval instruments of torture. Accidentally sat at wrong table, threatened to have throat slit. The first week of my 12-year set was the worst. I was a skinny 20-year-old with no criminal history, and it takes a while to learn that most people are mostly talk. I accidentally sat at the black table at chow, made a point of staying there and eating with them when they showed up to avoid offending them, was labeled a race traitor by the whites and was told someone would be coming to slit my throat. Nobody came, as most people don't want to be inconvenienced with a long stint in the hole for killing someone for something so small, but I slept with a pen cap hooked to my watch band holding a sharp pencil against my wrist in case I had to stab someone in defense. Living for days with the crippling fear of imminent death beeped with my nerves. My hands shake a little now. A 5'4" female guard had her jaw broken. I wasn't an inmate, but I was a guard. I have a couple of different stories, but the one that always got me was when I was walking down the mile to get to another block and the inmate in front of me decided the 5'4" female guard was the one he was going to let his anger out on. She stopped him to ask where he was going and if he was okay, considering this certain inmate was normally a happy person. When he stopped, he just started hitting her over and over. Before I could tackle him and yell for help, he managed to break her jaw and fracture her cheekbones. By the end of it he had to be taken to the infirmary as well for some broken bones. Some of the guards were less than happy to see a almost 6-foot inmate beating on a guard. Let alone one that would have a hard enough time defending herself if she. Another time I was doing my count and the inmates on row 3 started yelling for a boss, what they call guards. When I got up to see what was going on, one of the inmates in the first cell had his pants at his ankles, a shiv in his hand, and was wiping what I found out to be his own blood, despite there not being any visible cuts on his arms or legs. I couldn't see his midsection due to his long shirt. He looked me dead in the eyes and said, I am the rosary and my blood is the ash. I will cleanse this place of all that believe in the false god above. All the while his cellmate was in the back with his hands up saying, I haven't touched him. After getting the SARG on duty, he was taken to the infirmary. I was told he is known for doing this kind of thing to get transferred to our psych unit during the summer. Our unit was a concrete building with no AC in Texas. Needless to say, it got super hot even at night. Female inmate placed a razor blade in a bar of soap. My friend is in a Texas prison, and she said one woman prisoner put a razor blade in a bar of soap and used it to cut up another prisoner's face. Cuts and blood everywhere. The scariest thing as far as I'm concerned is that she said the guards didn't do anything for a few minutes, just let the two keep on fighting. 8 guards tased a wet inmate. He spent 2 days naked, rocking back and forth while I was being proceed. One of the guests was screaming non-stop about suing everyone and making the cops his B***tch. He was still very under the influence. All the cops were generally laughing about it until one decided that it needed to stop, so they all suited up and went in to shut him up. They were more jacked than any HS football team I've ever seen. Off they went, and about 3 minutes later, silence. Walked me by his cell on the way to my new room, and he was just sitting there buck-ass naked. Few hours go by and he decides to kill himself by drowning in the toilet. This will never work. Well, in go about 8 cops in full gear. I would think 8 professional guards could move one guy, but they decided to taser him several times while his head is in a metal toilet and water. For 2 days he just sat naked on the floor, rocking back and forth with a blanket thrown over him. Then he just disappeared. An inmate was beaten for intentionally turning on the sprinkler system. Honestly, the scariest moment for me was my first walk back to the dorm. You had no idea what you're walking into. All you can think about is what you've heard about and seen on TV. When you get to the back with your clothes and mat roll, everyone is just staring you down. Some are catcalling you basically. Usually this is just to f***ck with you though. Other than that, I didn't have any issues. We did have the one guy that was in ISO outside of our dorm. He kept being a dick and hitting the sprinkler head in his room. That caused the hall to flood, which in turn flooded into our dorm. There is a lock room between the hall and outdoor. After about the 3rd time this happened and a few guys had gotten their stuff wet, they told the guard, next time he does it, just lock his ass in that room and we'll take care of it. Not sure if they were joking or serious at the time or not. But sure enough, the hallway flooded the next day. They told us all to step back by our rack. In comes 2 guards with the guy from isolation. They left him in the lock room and walked out. Then the door to our door unlocked. 4 guys whipped that dude's ass for a good 2 minutes before they came and got him. Stuff stayed dry after that. Inmates were randomly beaten after a guard was killed. An officer was attacked and killed by an inmate. Every night, for weeks, 3rd shift would come on and a half-dozen officers would pick cells at random and just beat the sh**t out of whoever who was unlucky enough to be in there. Imagine sitting in the dark, hearing a grown man, just 100 feet away, screaming in pain and agony. Did I mention the co's were laughing in between blows? Beaten over dessert, watching a dude get beat senseless with a padlock in sock. Over a dessert. Inmate casually had neck sliced. I was walking back from breakfast when someone sliced the back of my neck open with a razor blade. That was pretty terrifying. Everything is scary on day one. Everything is just scary as can be. You don't really know where you will be safe, if anywhere. Every time you are passing someone, are they going to shank you? Are they going to cold cock you in your face? Chow time was total panic mode. Hundreds of violent thugs in a close group outnumbering the guards, 25 to 1. If something went down, you would be dead before order was restored. When incidents happen, you have to hide, but not cower. You have to keep your back to the wall so you can fend off any incoming attacks. So the first chow timer fight broke out was the scariest time I was there. As days went on, you become more aware of when to be alarmed, but there are plenty of sneak attacks that come when all is calm. One time during morning chow, a goon squad of a few people were coming to get someone and they had to pass my direction. They weren't coming after me, but I didn't know that until they passed me. That was the most scary moment. I was almost frozen, yet ready to throw down. You can't show emotions in these situations either. You can't let the dude sitting across from you see you panicking. Wild inmates. From a nurse's perspective, I worked in prison as a nurse. Sometimes severely violent or mentally unstable inmates were placed in the chair. This was always a temporary thing. It's basically a big black chair that after the inmate is handcuffed legs and feet, she is then tied to this chair to contain them. Because this risks their circulation being cut off, there was required a nurse to be present to check pulses every 15 minutes in hands and feet. They were let out of the chair every 2 hours for a 15-minute period to walk around the cell. So an inmate on PCP comes into the prison intake, wild and combative. He is immediately put into the chair by a set of 5 trained corrections officers in SWAT-like gear. I was called from the medical unit to be assigned to monitor his circulation. He's acting out of it, but other than some yelling he was pretty calm with me being there, but he can only be so wild when tied to a chair anyways. The 2-hour time frame was reached to let him out to walk the cell. As soon as he had his handcuffs unlocked he went completely insane. Biting the officers in the arms and shoulders and head-butting them as well as punching them in the face. I had to run out of the cell and back off as quickly as I could. I managed to get out fine, but the officers had to restrain him immediately again. All 5 had to go to the hospital for either broken bones, stitches or chunks bitten out of their arms. It was all pretty horrific. Saw someone slashed first day in. My very first time in jail when I was 18 was a bit of a trip. Went through the whole entry process where they check your butt for stuff, make you feel like a piece of sh*t, threaten you, etc. It was pretty fun. Then the group I was with were split up to head to different cell blocks. My foot was barely through the cell block door when a siren started blaring and we were told to face the wall and not move. A bunch of guards rushed the cell block and after a couple of minutes they rushed a guy covered in blood past us, followed by a guy the first assumed was the cause of the blood. Find out later that they had an argument about AF*C King books, so one guy slashed the other's face repeatedly with a razor blade melted into a toothbrush. I thought that my entire stay was going to be filled with sh*t like this, but I lucked out and knew someone in there, so I actually had it pretty easy.